Hey, dear viewer, where are you joining me from? A tiny hidden gem of a town or a sprawling, lively city? Share your city and country in the comments below. And please share this video with your friends and family. It helps so much. Let's begin. Max Wilder was a man forged by discipline. 15 years in the Army Rangers had burned away any trace of softness, replacing it with something unbending, muscle shaped by obligation, and a spirit tempered in fire. At 38, his imposing frame wasn't just a product of brutal conditioning. It bore the scars and weight of 3 tours in Afghanistan, countless Black Ops assignments, and a deep-rooted belief that loyalty was the only currency that never lost its value. The rhythmic chop of helicopter blades thrummed above as the transport rose into the sky. Max adjusted the strap of his duffel bag and peered down at Fort Bragg shrinking into the patchwork of earth below. Clutched in one calloused hand was a worn photograph, Kara holding their daughter Gwen on her first day of preschool. The sunlight lit up Kara's auburn hair, casting a soft halo around her gentle smile. Gwen's eyes, fierce and green, mirrored his own, and her toothless grin seemed to defy time. "I'm coming home, sweetheart," he said under his breath, voice raspy from too many orders barked across dusty battlefields. His phone buzzed against his leg. A message lit the screen. Dylan Steele. 1800. We're ready. Kara has been getting the house perfect. Gwen keeps asking when Daddy's home. A rare flicker touched the edges of Max's mouth. Dylan was dependable, a former Marine with the same silent understanding shared by men who'd worn the uniform. He'd stepped in when Max couldn't, checking in on Kara and Gwen, sending occasional updates that carried more weight than they appeared to. But something had shifted. Kara had grown strange in recent calls, dodging questions, glossing over details. The last time he'd asked to hear Gwen's voice, Kara said she was napping, even though daylight was still pouring through the windows behind her. It gnawed at him. Still, suspicion was an old disease in combat veterans. Distance bred doubt. Too many soldiers had unraveled chasing shadows that weren't real. By the time the chopper touched down at Pope Army Airfield, dusk had begun to stretch long fingers across the pavement. Max's thoughts raced ahead. He'd told Kara he'd be back next week, wanting to surprise them. He imagined Gwen's face lighting up when she saw him. That memory had been his anchor through long months of silence. After clearing customs and riding in near silence with the cab driver, they pulled up to his quiet street in Fayetteville. The moment his boots hit the pavement, something struck him. A gleaming black Escalade parked across the way. Brett Mason's ride. Kara's old friend from back in Georgia, the smooth-talking insurance rep who'd conveniently relocated nearby half a year ago. Max had met him once at a barbecue before deploying, and he'd never liked the man. His smile felt artificial, his charm calculated. And the way he looked at Kara? It had triggered something raw and instinctual. Max handed over the fare and shouldered his duffel. His steps were careful along the walkway he'd laid himself 3 summers ago. The front door was cracked open, odd, considering Kara had always been meticulous about locking up. Stepping inside, the air felt off, unfamiliar. He dropped the bag to the floor and scanned the hallway. The walls were bare, once crowded with snapshots of birthdays, beach trips, and Christmas mornings. Even the fridge was stripped clean of Gwen's drawings and construction paper crafts. A suffocating silence pressed in on him. "Kara," he called, voice low. "Gwen?" A faint noise floated down from the 2nd floor, a soft, pained whimper. His body snapped into motion. Training surged forward, instincts sharpening his focus. He took the stairs 2 at a time, zeroing in on the sound. It led him to Gwen's bedroom. He eased the door open. She sat huddled on her bed, clutching the stuffed elephant he'd mailed her from the sandbox. But what stopped his heart was her hand. Wrapped in gauze, her small left hand was missing 3 fingers. The bandages were dark with dried blood. "Gwen," he breathed, stumbling forward. Her head lifted, eyes wide. Fear filled them, then something else. Recognition. Relief. "Daddy?" she whispered. Then louder, her voice cracking with emotion, "Daddy!" He swept her into his arms. She felt too light, too frail, as though she might break with a touch. She clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably. "You really came," she cried. "Mommy said, she said you screamed when you died, that you couldn't stop the bad men, that you ran away." Each word was a dagger, piercing deeper than any bullet ever had. He held her close, his heart pounding, mind reeling. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't just betrayal. It was something far worse, and now the truth had come home with him. Max forced steadiness into his voice, masking the storm of rage that brewed just beneath his calm facade. "I'm here now, sweetheart. Daddy's got you. Can you tell me what happened to your hand?" Gwen flinched at his touch, her face streaked with tears, pale and blotchy with fear. "It was Mommy's friend, Brett," she whimpered. "He got really mad when I spilled juice on his shoes. He said I was clumsy, like you." Her lip trembled. "Then he took me to the garage." Her small hand brushed against the bandages covering the raw ends of her fingers. "He used the big scissors, the ones Mommy uses for the rose bushes." Max's vision darkened around the edges, his pulse pounding with violent fury. Garden shears. The monster had used garden shears on a 4-year-old. His daughter. His baby girl. "Where is your mother right now?" Max asked, his voice now stripped of warmth, frigid and even. "She's at Brett's house," Gwen replied quietly. "She sleeps there most nights. She said, you weren't coming back, so Brett's my new daddy now." Her voice faltered, cracking with emotion. "But I don't want a new daddy. I want you." Max held her close, pulling her into a protective embrace as his thoughts turned razor-sharp and cold, the same mental clarity that had kept him alive in the worst of combat. But this wasn't a foreign battlefield. This was home. And this betrayal demanded something more than justice. It demanded retribution. "Listen to me, baby," he said, gently lifting her chin to meet her eyes. "I won't let anyone hurt you again, you hear me?" Gwen nodded slowly, trust shimmering in the tears that still clung to her lashes. "That's my brave girl. I'm going to call Uncle Dylan, okay? He'll stay with you while Daddy handles something important. Can you be strong a little while longer?" "I've been strong for a long time, Daddy," she whispered, her voice heavy with more life than any child should carry. Max's heart broke and steeled itself in the same instant. As he pulled out his phone to call Dylan Steele, a singular, lethal thought repeated in his mind. "No one touches my daughter," and walks away. Dylan arrived in under 10 minutes, his face grim, his hands shaking slightly as he assessed the damage done to Gwen. Their eyes met across the room, saying more in silence than words ever could. Two men shaped by the brutality of war. "Jesus, Max," Dylan muttered when they stepped into the hallway. "How long has this been going on?" "I'm about to find out," Max answered, his voice like honed steel. "Can you stay with her? I have something I need to do." Dylan nodded without hesitation. "Of course. But Max, what are you planning?" Max gave a cold, hollow smile. "I'm going to have a conversation with my wife." Before leaving, he knelt beside the bed where Dylan sat, softly reading from a worn picture book. Gwen lay beneath the covers, her injured hand resting on a well-loved stuffed elephant. The sight twisted his gut with rage. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "I need to ask you something really important. Besides your hand, did Brett hurt you in any other way?" Gwen's face crumbled, tears spilling down her cheeks as she gave a slow nod. She lifted her pajama top, revealing a line of perfectly round scars burned into the skin along her ribs, 7 in all. Cigarette burns. Each one deliberate, each one inflicted with intent. "He said it was 'cause I was bad," she whispered. "Mommy watched. She said I deserved it for not calling Brett Daddy." Dylan let out a low growl of prayer mixed with fury, shaking his head in disbelief. Max said nothing. He only nodded once, locking every horrifying detail into the disciplined, tactical part of his mind, the part trained to remember everything, the part that made sure every debt was paid. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Surprise party starts in 30 minutes. Candace is so excited to see you. Daisy." Daisy Grant, Kara's sister. so the farce was still going strong. Perfect. Max kissed Gwen on the forehead. Uncle Dylan's going to take you somewhere safe, okay? Daddy's going to make sure you never have to see Brett again. I promise. 12 minutes later, Max drove through a quiet neighborhood of tree-lined streets and pristine lawns. He'd done his prep work. Before his last deployment, he made it his mission to know the community. Names, faces, histories. Brett Mason lived in an obnoxiously large house in Haymount, the kind built to scream wealth and hide insecurity. Max parked several houses down, just out of sight. From where he sat, he could see silhouettes moving behind the wide front windows. The party was underway. Daisy was there, her husband Neil too, a scattering of others smiling, chatting, sipping drinks. Pretending. Pretending Kara was a loyal wife. Pretending no child had been brutalized. Pretending that this was just another Saturday night. Pretending hell could wear a smile and a party hat. Max slipped around the perimeter of the house, blending into the shadows with effortless precision. Every step was quiet and deliberate, the result of years spent under strict military discipline. At the back, the sliding glass door gave easily under his touch. It wasn't even locked, careless. Someone was going to regret that oversight. He entered through the kitchen, scanning the upscale appliances and gleaming granite countertops. Whatever Brett Mason's line of work was, it clearly paid well. Laughter drifted from the front of the house, soft, unbothered, oblivious. Following the sound across the wooden floor, Max moved with practiced silence. He paused just behind a partial wall that divided the kitchen from the main room, crouching low like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. Kara stood near the hearth, dressed in a sleek red outfit he didn't recognize. Her once soft auburn hair had been cut into a stylish, sharper look. She was breathtaking and completely unrecognizable. It felt like a stranger had slipped into the body of the woman he once cherished. Brett stood beside her, his arm casually draped around her waist, fingers settled there like they belonged. He sipped from a beer bottle, wearing an air of smug ease. "I'm telling you, there's still a chance Max might show up early," said Daisy from a chair near the window. "He never played by the rules." Kara gave a dismissive laugh. "He won't. His flight's not due back until Tuesday. Even if he decided to come early, he'd stop at the house first. We'd hear about it before he even got close." Brett chuckled, low and arrogant, and the sound made Max's teeth grind. "Relax, sweetheart. If Sergeant Hardass barges in, what's he gonna do? You're divorcing him, remember? And I've already spoken to my attorney about taking custody." "Custody?" Neil Campbell asked, brows arching in surprise. Brett shrugged, still grinning. "Gwen has been accident-prone lately. A couple emergency room trips, some bruises here and there. Ever since Daddy left, she's been a real klutz. If it keeps happening, Child Services might have something to say." Max's fists tightened at his sides. This piece of trash was laying the groundwork, crafting a lie to make his daughter seem like the issue, while painting himself and Kara as the victims. It was cold, calculated, sickening. "That's terrible," Daisy said, but her voice held something, an edge that hinted she might know more than she was saying. "Maybe Gwen does need a steadier male influence." Kara nodded in agreement. "Brett's been a godsend. He's giving her boundaries, discipline, the kind of structure Max never could with all his deployments." "Structure," Max whispered to himself, and the image of his daughter's burns flashed across his mind. Brett pulled Kara in tighter, his hand sliding down to rest on her hip. "The kid's got potential, but she needs someone who knows how to keep her in line." "Max let her get away with too much," Kara added. "Now she acts out." "Like when she dumped juice on your new heels?" Daisy said, laughing, and that sound hit Max like a knife to the gut. "They learn fast when there are consequences," Brett said. "Believe me, she won't do that again." That was enough. Max had heard everything he needed, and then some. He stepped out from behind the partition, emerging into the open like a storm on the horizon, silent, measured, dangerous. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said, voice cold as steel. Every face turned to him. Conversation evaporated. Kara's expression shifted rapidly. Shock, fear, then a flush of guilt and panic. Brett stiffened, fingers tightening around the neck of his beer bottle. The other guests froze, their faces a mix of disbelief, shame, and dread. "Max," Kara stammered, her hand pressing to her chest. "You're early." "Surprise," he said flatly. His eyes moved across the room, analyzing each person, assessing threats. The soldier in him never slept. Brett straightened, arm still possessively around Kara. "Well, look who's back. Home from the sandbox, huh?" Max didn't miss a beat. "Tell me something, Brett. How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" The air cracked with tension. Daisy gasped. Neil nearly choked on his drink. Brett's face twisted in anger. But beneath it, something else flickered. Calculation, maybe even fear. "Now hold on," Brett began, trying to take control. "You don't get to come in here and—" "8 months," Kara cut in sharply, her chin raised. "It's been 8 months, and no, I don't regret it." The words hit like poison, spreading fast. Max gave a slow nod, as if filing the data away. 8 months, he repeated. "That's about when Gwen started getting hurt." Brett's gaze darkened. "What are you implying?" Max took a step forward. His stance looked casual, but the danger in him was unmistakable. "No implications," he said, "just facts." He raised one finger. "Fact 1, Gwen is missing 3 fingers. A second. Fact 2, she has 7 cigarette burns on her ribs. A third. Fact 3, she told me exactly who did it. She gave names, locations, dates. Silence descended over the room, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock. Brett's face cycled through a storm of reactions. Denial, fury, and finally something cold and unreadable. "She's always been a liar," Brett said with forced calm. "You know that. She's damaged, Max. Maybe because her dad was never around, just a shadow in pictures and broken promises." "An abusive father," Max said, tasting the words on his tongue like venom. "So that's the version you're going with?" Kara stepped closer, her voice trembling. Whether it was panic or outrage was unclear. "Max, you need to leave. This is Brett's house. You're not welcome here." Max's smile was thin and threatening. "You're absolutely right, Kara. This is Brett's place. And you're right again. I've got no business being here." He let the moment stretch, the silence turning sharp. "But I'm not stepping outside until we've had a very clear conversation about what happened to my daughter. Every detail, every wound." His voice held the quiet menace of someone who'd seen the worst of the world, and Brett seemed to catch it. His hand slowly edged toward his waist. A subtle giveaway. He was probably armed. "I think we're done here," Brett said evenly. "Everyone should go. We'll revisit this another time, when things aren't so heated." "Heated?" Max let out a brittle, joyless laugh. "You haven't seen heated yet, brother, but you will." He turned to the others in the room. "Daisy, Neil, the rest of you, leave. Right now. You've got 60 seconds. After that, what happens next stays between me, my wife, and the man who shattered my daughter's body." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Daisy clutched her handbag and said softly, "Max, please, don't do anything you'll regret." "There's not a single part of this I'll regret," Max said, eyes locked on Brett. "But I can't say the same for the rest of you." The guests hurried out in near silence, like shadows slipping through cracks. The house suddenly felt cavernous, the air so heavy it could choke. One by one, car engines roared to life outside, then vanished into the night. Max was the first to speak again, his voice disturbingly composed. "Let's talk about what comes next." The living room felt like a live wire, stretched to snapping. Max stood still, hands loose at his sides, while Kara and Brett lingered near the fireplace, looking like frightened animals backed into a corner. "Max, just let me explain," Kara said, her voice slipping into that familiar pleading tone, the one she used for forgotten anniversaries and harmless fibs. But this betrayal dwarfed those old lies into nothing. "Explain what exactly?" Max replied with the same calm tone someone might use to comment on the weather. How you watched your lover brutalize our daughter. How you told her I died. Or how you collected my military death benefits while I was dodging mortars overseas. Brett's hand moved again, slow, calculated, toward the weapon concealed on his belt. Max caught it in his peripheral vision, but didn't take his eyes off Kara. She was out of control, Kara sobbed, the tears finally falling. Brett was only trying to teach her discipline. She wouldn't listen. She was acting out. Enough. Max's voice sliced through the room like a blade. Don't say another word. The authority in his tone, tempered by years of commanding soldiers in war zones, stopped her cold. Her mouth snapped shut, and for the first time, real fear appeared in her eyes. Max slowly raised his phone, the screen glowing in the dim light. I've been recording since I walked in, every sentence, every confession, every vile truth about what you both did to Gwen. It's already uploaded to a secure cloud and shared with 3 law enforcement contacts. Brett's face lost its color. You can't do that. That's illegal. You need permission to... North Carolina's a one-party consent state, Max cut in, voice as cold as steel. One person agrees, that's all it takes. And I did. The kind of charges this conversation will bring, the DA's going to love this. Kara dropped into the armchair, like her legs had vanished beneath her. Reality had finally landed, hard. Max, please, we can fix this. We'll get help. We can go to counseling. Max gave a hollow laugh, dry and bitter. Counseling? You watched that man snip our daughter's fingers off with garden shears. You helped put out cigarettes on her skin. You told her I was dead just to break her spirit. And now you think therapy is the answer? That's when Brett made his move, swift and trained. His hand lunged for the gun at his waist. But Max had been ready. 15 years of battlefield instincts roared to life. In a single smooth motion, he crossed the room. His left hand locked around Brett's wrist. His right elbow drove into Brett's gut with deadly accuracy. Brett folded, choking on air, as Max expertly wrenched the Glock 19 free. Glock 19, Max said, turning it in his hand like a seasoned operator. Reliable, simple, good choice, but only if you can get to it first. He popped the magazine, cleared the round from the chamber, and sent the pieces skittering in opposite directions. Brett slumped to the floor, clutching his torso and gasping like a beached fish. Kara didn't move. She shrank into the chair as if it might somehow consume her, eyes wide and full of dread. Max's voice was calm, flat, exactly the tone he used during mission briefings, clinical and unshakable. This is how it's going to go, he said. Kara, you're going to grab one bag and walk out that door tonight. No farewells, no contacting Gwen, no visits, no interference with the divorce proceedings. You're finished here. But Max, she's my daughter too. Don't. The single syllable dropped like a hammer, sharp, absolute. A real mother doesn't sit back and watch her child suffer. A real mother doesn't side with the one causing that pain. The moment you defended him instead of Gwen, you lost the right to call yourself her parent. He shifted his attention to Brett, who had finally pushed himself upright, but was still gasping from the earlier confrontation. As for you, Max said, ice lacing every word, you disappear. Tonight. Permanently. You can't tell me what to do, Brett rasped, trying to mask his fear with defiance. I'll report you, You won't do a damn thing, Max cut in sharply. His words were final, and they snapped the last thread of resistance in Brett. If you so much as breathe in the direction of this state again, if you come within 100 miles of Gwen, I will track you down, and believe me, you do not want that. There wasn't a shred of doubt in his voice. Whatever Brett had been clinging to, some fantasy of control, shattered into panic. Max reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal object, no bigger than a coin. This is military-grade GPS, undetectable, untraceable. It has a 50-mile radius. He tossed it underhand toward Brett, who caught it without thinking. That's your tether now. If I see this thing point in the direction of North Carolina, I'll know, and I'll be there before you can even lock your door. Brett stared at the device like it might explode. You're unhinged, he murmured, but even he didn't sound convinced. You think this is about laws? Protocol? Max's smile was cold and predatory. I spent over a decade identifying, tracking, and eliminating threats to national security. You don't even qualify as a challenge. You're just another liability waiting to be erased. Kara found her voice again, though it trembled with fear. Max, think about what you're saying. Gwen needs stability. She needs to be free of both of you, he said flatly. She needs trauma counseling, medical treatment, and time to recover from everything you subjected her to. What she doesn't need is the kind of people who think gardening tools qualify as discipline. He tapped his phone, opening a new screen. I've already alerted the authorities. Child Protective Services has the file. So does the FBI. You crossed state lines to harm a minor. Since I'm military, it's federal now. JAG has been looped in. This affects my deployment status. He swiped again, showing another photo. Your sister, Daisy? She just received a package, photos of Gwen's injuries, audio recordings from tonight, and a detailed report. She's probably on the phone with your mother right now. The look on Kara's face crumpled. She looked gutted. Family opinion had always been her obsession, her addiction. Oh, and Brett? Max added, turning slightly. Your office got the same envelope. Small-town clients talk. Tomorrow morning people will know you abuse children. Let's see what that does to your business. Brett had gone pale, the reality of his ruined reputation sinking in. Trust was his lifeline, and it was slipping away. You're destroying us, he said, barely above a whisper. No, Max corrected him, his voice calm. I'm safeguarding Gwen. Your destruction? That's just fallout. He moved to the front window, gently parting the blinds to scan the street. You've got 30 minutes to load your car with whatever you can carry. After that, I make some calls to men who don't bother with red tape. What kind of men? Kara asked, her voice a faint breath. Max's smile held no warmth. You ever hear of Jake Krause? Owns a private security company in Raleigh. Ralph Best? He retrieves lost property. Doesn't care much whether it's legal. Derek Schultz just retired from the Corps. He's freelancing now. Between jobs, you could say. He let the silence linger. These guys worked in places where justice was whatever they made it. They don't blink at threats, especially not to the families of people they served with, especially not when it's a kid involved. Brett didn't wait for more. He turned and hurried upstairs, finally choosing survival over pride. Kara remained seated, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Max, I know I failed. I know I made terrible choices. But Gwen is still my daughter. I love her, she said, voice cracking. Max knelt beside her chair, his voice quieted for the first time all evening. Kara, what you're feeling, you think it's love. But real love doesn't burn a child with cigarettes. It doesn't chop off fingers. And it definitely doesn't choose an abusive man over your own daughter. He slowly stood, the softness in his features hardening like steel. You had 8 months. 8 months to walk away from Brett, to choose Gwen, to be the parent she needed. But you didn't. You stood by and let it unfold. Worse, you took part in it. Now you have to reckon with that. Upstairs, the frantic rustle of items being shoved into bags echoed through the house. Max glanced at his watch. Fear made Brett quick on his feet. Good. The faster he left, the easier it would be to deal with what came next. What happens now? Kara asked in a barely audible voice. Now, Max said, his tone cold and final. You both disappear from our lives. Gwen will get the help she needs, therapy, care, all of it. I'll be filing for full custody and divorce. After that, we rebuild. And if we don't leave? She asked. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move a muscle, but something flickered in his gaze, something darker than she'd seen before. She instinctively pressed herself deeper into the chair. Then I stop being civil, he said evenly. And trust me, Kara, you don't want to find out what that means. 3 days later, Max sat in the overly sterile waiting area of Cape Fear Valley Health, surrounded by harsh white walls. Gwen was inside, undergoing her 3rd medical evaluation. The doctors were documenting every injury, missing fingers, burns, and the invisible emotional trauma. Each procedure meant to build a legal case felt like another violation of her already broken innocence. Dr. Patricia Cahill, a pediatric surgeon with a reputation for kindness and a steady hand, stepped out of the exam room and silently took the seat beside him. "The damage to her hands was intentional," she said softly. "Whoever did this had a solid understanding of anatomy. They knew how to cause maximum pain and psychological damage without severing major vessels." Max's jaw tensed. "You're saying it was planned?" "In my professional opinion, yes," she confirmed. "Same goes for the burns. They're positioned where clothes would cover them, designed to harm but stay hidden." "This wasn't a moment of rage," she continued. "It was calculated, purposeful." She handed him a thick folder packed with documentation. "I've organized everything for the legal process. But Max, there's something more important. Gwen's recovery is going to be long and difficult. Her body will heal, but the emotional damage, that's going to take much more time." "How long are we talking?" he asked. "Years," she said, not sugarcoating the truth. "Even with excellent therapists and a stable environment, when a child is hurt by those who are supposed to protect them, it rewires how they see the world." Max opened the folder, staring down at the pages. Photo after photo etched themselves into his memory. Gwen's small, mangled hands, the burns on her torso, her hollow, faraway stare as doctors poked and prodded, each image a snapshot of her suffering, and more fuel for the fire burning inside him. "There's more," Dr. Cahill said, her voice lowering as she glanced around. During her psychological evaluation, Gwen mentioned other events, things that happened before the worst of the abuse, before the mutilation. This didn't begin suddenly. It escalated over time. "What kind of things?" he asked, already dreading the answer. She described being locked in closets, shut away in the basement, sometimes for hours, no food, starved as punishment for small mistakes. And emotionally, they told her you were dead, that you'd abandoned her, that she was unloved. Every word landed like a blow. While he had been serving overseas, trusting Kara to care for their daughter, Gwen had been living through a slow, mounting nightmare, one that ended in irreversible harm. His phone buzzed. A message from Dylan Steele lit up the screen. "Package delivered. Video confirmed." Max had made sure the evidence was distributed, not only to the authorities, but to select people in the community who needed the truth before Kara and Brett could twist the narrative. "Dr. Cahill," he asked, "how often do situations like this happen?" "More often than anyone wants to admit," she said grimly. "It usually starts with a custodial parent and a partner who sees the child as a nuisance or a threat. Abuse becomes a way to dominate both the child and the other parent." Brett had seized full command of the situation, exerting authority over both Gwen and Kara. It was a clear continuation of a troubling pattern that had begun to unfold. But one pressing question remained unanswered. Why had Kara, of all people, allowed it to happen? Why hadn't she stepped in to defend her daughter? Max couldn't stop turning it over in his mind. The Kara he had married 8 years earlier had been nurturing, fiercely maternal, always quick to protect. But the woman who had silently watched as Brett abused their child felt unrecognizable, either a stranger altogether or a buried version of herself that had finally surfaced under pressure. His phone buzzed, the name on the screen, Jake Kraus, a man he'd served alongside and had recently brought up in conversation with Brett. Max stepped outside to take the call. "Max, I got your message," Jake said, his voice sharp, tightly coiled with anger. "Please tell me you didn't let that bastard walk free." "He's already gone," Max replied. "Took off the night I confronted him." "Where'd he go?" "I tracked his vehicle. He's in South Carolina now, heading toward Florida." "What about Kara?" "She's holed up at her sister's place in Wilmington. She's hired a divorce attorney, but hasn't tried to contact Gwen or interfere with custody in any way." Jake paused, his silence heavy. "There are ways to make sure people like them don't keep making trouble," he said eventually. "Permanent ways." The suggestion hung in the air, thick and dangerous. Max had known Jake for over 10 years, They'd seen war together in Afghanistan. Jake had always leaned towards swift, irreversible outcomes. His security outfit was staffed by others like him, men who believed in cutting problems off at the root, not dragging them through court. "I appreciate it," Max replied cautiously, "but I've got this handled." "You sure?" Jake asked, not backing down. "Because if that bastard so much as breathes near your little girl again, I won't wait for your say-so. I'll take care of it myself." "I get it, but right now I might need your help tracking them. Legal surveillance." "Say no more," Jake said. "Ralph Best still has contacts in law enforcement, and Derek Schultz can rig up advanced monitoring systems. We'll keep tabs on them for as long as it takes." When the call ended, Max walked back inside the hospital. Gwen sat in the waiting area with Dr. Jessica Dixon, a child psychologist. She was drawing quietly with her good hand, dark, unsettling sketches that mirrored the pain locked inside her. "Daddy," she said when she saw him. "Doctor, Jessica says I can draw my feelings, but my drawings are scary." He crouched beside her, studying the pages. One image showed a tiny figure trapped in a garage, surrounded by looming forms wielding sharp tools. Another depicted a house with glaring window eyes and a door twisted into a scream. The last drawing was just a chaos of heavy black lines scribbled in rage. "It's okay to draw scary things," Dr. Dixon assured them gently. "This is part of trauma recovery. Gwen is doing what she needs to heal." Max turned to his daughter. Despite everything, her innocence lingered in her expression. She was still beautiful, still his little girl. "Hey," he said softly, "remember those bedtime stories I used to tell? About knights who protect people from monsters?" She nodded slowly. "Well, Daddy is one of those knights, and my job is to make sure no monsters ever hurt you again. Do you believe me?" "Yes, Daddy," she whispered. "But what if the monsters come back?" His jaw clenched. "Then I'll do what knights do," he told her. "I'll destroy them." Dr. Dixon lifted an eyebrow at his words, but Max didn't care. Gwen needed reassurance. She needed to know, without question, that she was safe, and that those who hurt her would never get near her again. That evening, after dropping Gwen off at Dylan Steele Place for another overnight stay, Max returned home for the first time since discovering what had been done. The house felt cursed, steeped in silence and shame. Every room seemed to whisper of what had been allowed to happen there. He walked through the house methodically, looking for signs, clues of deception, of pain, of neglect. In Gwen's room, he uncovered a shoebox hidden beneath the bed. Inside, medical supplies, gauze, antiseptic, over-the-counter painkillers. Someone had tried to patch up her wounds in secret. It was obvious now. Her injuries had been deliberately concealed. In the master bedroom, traces of Brett were everywhere. Clothing, toiletries, even a spare key to the man's SUV. This hadn't just been a casual affair. Brett had made himself at home, in Max's house, in Max's bed, and worst of all, in Gwen's life. Max's phone vibrated again, the number unfamiliar. "Sergeant Wilder?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking. This is Agent Andrea Sampson with the FBI. I understand you reported a potential federal case involving child abuse." "That's right. We'd like to set up a formal interview with you and your daughter. We'll need to go over the evidence and discuss the next steps in the investigation." A chill of satisfaction settled over Max. Justice was finally moving, painfully slowly in his view. His thoughts, however, surged ahead with precision. "Agent Sampson," he said, "you should know. The primary suspect has crossed state lines. I'm confident he's in Florida now." "We'll handle the apprehension," Sampson said with professional calm. "But I need your assurance you won't act on your own against either individual." Max hesitated. The silence lingered. "I won't break the law," he said at last. It wasn't exactly the guarantee Sampson had requested, but it was all Max could offer without lying. He wouldn't violate legal boundaries, but he would test every limit to make sure Brett Mason and Kara Wilder never again posed a danger to his daughter. And if they returned, if they dared to target Gwen again, well, there were lawful ways to neutralize a threat. He just had to think like a soldier. As the call ended, Max shifted focus toward planning. Phase 1, legal filings and document collection, was already underway. Phase 2 would require patience, finesse, and the strategic discipline that had kept him alive through 3 tours in combat zones. Brett and Kara may have assumed they could slip away, erase their damage like a bad memory, and begin fresh. But they were about to learn how wrong they were. Max Wilder never forgot those who endangered his own. And forgiveness? That wasn't something he extended to threats against his family. 14 days after Brett and Kara vanished, Max sat across from his attorney, Lloyd Clark, in an office that felt more like a command center than a law firm. The stack of divorce documents on the desk was so thorough, it resembled a military intelligence file. Lloyd, a seasoned ex-JAG lawyer, had handled his share of brutal cases, but even he appeared impressed. "This is one of the most comprehensive filings I've seen," Lloyd said, eyes scanning the paperwork. "You've compiled medical records, recorded statements, video evidence, eyewitness accounts, FBI documentation. You could take them down in criminal court, let alone in a custody hearing." "I want full custody," Max stated flatly. "Exclusive rights, no visitation for Kara, and I want a restraining order covering Gwen, myself, and anyone who might someday be part of our household." Lloyd tilted his head. "Planning for the future, huh?" Max's expression hardened. "If I remarry, if Gwen ends up with a stepmother or siblings, I want them protected too." Lloyd nodded solemnly. "Understood. And what about dividing the assets?" "She gets half the house's value and half the joint savings. The rest stays with me. Gwen's education fund, both vehicles, my pensions, everything personal." "That's surprisingly generous," Lloyd said with a hint of surprise. "It's strategic," Max replied. "I want this finalized quickly and quietly. The longer this drags out, the more room they have to cause chaos. I'm not here for a fight over money, I'm here for Gwen." Right then, Lloyd's phone buzzed. He answered, his brow creasing. "Yes, put her through." He glanced over at Max. "It's Kara's legal counsel. They want to negotiate custody." Max's smile was cold and sharp. "Tell them we accept their complete surrender. If not, we'll see them in court." While Lloyd managed the conversation, Max turned to the most recent briefings from his surveillance contacts. Jay Krause had kept his promise. Brett was under 24/7 watch by a rotating crew of ex-military private investigators. The intelligence was revealing. Brett had driven straight to Tampa, Florida, booking into a rundown motel under an assumed name. Shortly afterward, he reconnected with Mario Cotton, an old associate now operating a small-time loan sharking business. It was obvious Brett was trying to reinvent himself, forging a new life through shady networks and illegal ties. What he didn't realize was that Mario had been under active FBI surveillance for racketeering, a fact that Max had made sure would work to his advantage through well-timed anonymous tips to the right federal contacts. Kara, meanwhile, had taken shelter with her sister Daisy in Wilmington, but domestic stability eluded her. Max's calculated leaks of incriminating evidence had detonated like a bomb in the Grant family. Kara's mother, Alma Lindsay, had severed ties completely after viewing the photographs of Gwen's injuries. Her father had gone even further, threatening legal action of his own if she ever tried to contact him again. It was the precise social implosion Max had engineered. With her support system collapsed and options drying up, Kara was spiraling, anxious, paranoid, increasingly erratic. And people who are desperate make mistakes. The more unstable someone is, the more severe their errors tend to be. After hanging up, Max returned his focus to the pile of documents before him. Kara's attorney was now claiming she lacked full mental capacity, arguing she'd suffered a breakdown and had been manipulated by Brett Mason. Their goal was to secure supervised visitation and joint custody. "What did you tell them?" Lloyd asked. "I said Gwen was mutilated by a man Kara knowingly invited into our client's home, and that she played an active role in the abuse," Max said. "I advised them to focus on keeping their client out of prison rather than negotiating parenting rights." Right then, his phone buzzed with a message from Dylan Steele. "Gwen is asking about her mom again. What should I tell her? Max replied quickly. Tell her mother is sick and needs time to get better before she can see her. That's the truth. But it wasn't the full picture. Gwen had been bringing up Kara more frequently, but always with a tinge of fear. She longed for her mother, yet the memory of the pain was still vivid and terrifying. Dr. Jessica Dixon had explained this was typical for children who've endured abuse. When the abuser is also someone they love, the emotional conflict can be profound. I need you to file another motion, Max told Lloyd. I want a comprehensive psychological assessment ordered for Kara before she's allowed anywhere near Gwen again. He hesitated for a moment. And I want Brett Mason named in the restraining order, even if he isn't Gwen's biological father. On what grounds? Lloyd asked. He lived in our home, acted in a parental role, and he personally inflicted the abuse. He's a direct and ongoing threat to my daughter. Lloyd began jotting notes. I can make that argument, it's not routine, but given the circumstances, a judge might agree. Just then, Max's phone rang. It was FBI agent Andrea Sampson. Sergeant Wilder, we've made progress on your case, she said. We've tracked Brett Mason to Tampa. Local law enforcement is assisting us in coordinating his arrest. We're also in the process of filing federal charges against your wife for conspiracy and failure to report child abuse. When do you expect the arrests? Max asked. Mason will likely be in custody within 48 hours. As for your wife, her legal team is in talks for a voluntary surrender. They're working on a plea deal. A quiet but sharp satisfaction crept through Max. What's the deal they're proposing? She pleads guilty to child endangerment. In return, she avoids prison, gets a suspended sentence and supervised probation, but she permanently forfeits all parental rights and must register as a child abuse offender. That was more than Max had anticipated. It would sever Kara's legal tie to Gwen permanently. And with the abuse registration, she would carry a permanent scar, a designation that would prevent her from working with children and disqualify her from playing the victim in future relationships. And Mason? Max asked. He'll face federal charges for crossing state lines to commit child abuse. With his criminal history, he's looking at an 8 to 12-year sentence. His history? Max's brow tightened. You didn't know? Agent Sampson asked. He has prior convictions for domestic violence in both South Carolina and Georgia. In 2019, he served 18 months for aggravated assault on a former girlfriend. The revelation hit Max like a blast of cold air. Kara hadn't just exercised poor judgment or been misled. She had deliberately exposed their daughter to a known abuser with a violent record. When the call ended, Max sat in silence across from Lloyd, trying to process the weight of what he had just learned. Everything started to make a terrible kind of sense. Brett's precision, the slow intensification of the abuse, his manipulation of Kara and the medical staff. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were the calculated moves of someone with experience. Max? Lloyd's voice pulled him back to the present. What did the FBI say? Brett's going to prison, Max said plainly. Kara is going to lose custody of Gwen. For good. The words came out flat, but their weight lingered. Everything was unfolding the way it was supposed to, but Max understood this wasn't over. Appeals could be filed, sentences could be reduced. Restraining orders weren't impenetrable shields. People who had nothing left were often the most dangerous. For now, he had secured legal protection for Gwen and held the perpetrators accountable. But genuine safety went beyond verdicts. It required foresight, constant vigilance, and the kind of preparedness born from living through combat zones. As he stepped out of Lloyd's office, Max reminded himself he needed to contact Jake Krause again. The surveillance system wasn't a temporary fix. It had to be permanent. He would also need to look into other safeguards, alarms for their new home, self-defense training for Gwen when she was old enough, contingency plans for every possible threat. Because he now understood something fundamental. Safety isn't an outcome. It's an ongoing mission. Brett Mason and Kara Wilder were about to learn that dismantling Max Wilder's life came at a cost far greater than prison time or legal battles. Some adversaries didn't disappear when the case closed. They lingered, hidden in plain sight, patient and calculating. And Max, though silent, hadn't forgotten. Waiting wasn't the same as forgiving. He stood motionless in the kitchen of his recently constructed home, his gaze fixed on Gwen as she colored at the breakfast table. Sunlight streamed through the specially installed bulletproof glass, just one of many protective upgrades. 6 months had passed since the violent clash at Brett's home, and since then, Max had built his life around two central goals: protection and recovery. From the outside, the house blended in with the rest of the neighborhood. Inside, it was a fortress. Outfitted by Jake Krause's elite security firm, the residence was equipped with advanced surveillance systems, infrared motion detectors, and a high-level alarm network linked directly to both local authorities and Jake's tactical response team. Reinforced steel doors, shatterproof ballistic windows, and a panic room capable of withstanding all but the most extreme military-grade attacks ensured that nothing was left to chance. "Daddy, look at this!" Gwen beamed, holding up her latest drawing. Her therapy sessions were clearly working. Although remnants of the past still occasionally surfaced in her art, there was more light now, more imagination and hope. This picture showed a brave knight defending a princess in a tall castle, facing off against a fire-breathing dragon. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Max said, his voice tinged with emotion as he noticed how seamlessly she used her prosthetic fingers. The medical team at Duke had created cutting-edge replacements, restoring nearly full dexterity to her hand. "Tell me what's happening in the picture." "The knight loves the princess, so he fights all the monsters to keep her safe. Then they live in the castle forever where no bad guys can get in." For the first time in months, a genuine smile reached Max's eyes. Gwen was healing, slowly but surely. The nightmares came less often. She was eating better, and she'd begun to feel safe again. Dr. Jessica Dixon, her trauma psychologist, called it remarkable progress, especially for a child who had endured such sustained physical and emotional harm. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Ralph Best lit up the screen. "Package en route. ETA. 20 minutes. Max had been waiting for this update. Brett Mason had been released from federal custody 2 months ahead of schedule due to overcrowding and good conduct. That early release had immediately triggered every contingency plan Max had in place. The court-mandated GPS tracker had failed long ago, but Jake's surveillance network had kept tabs on Brett from the moment he re-entered North Carolina. Evidently, Brett still hadn't learned the value of distance. "Gwen, sweetie," Max said softly. "Uncle Dylan's coming over to hang out and watch some fun movies while Daddy steps out for something important." She tilted her head, narrowing her bright green eyes. "Is it about the monsters again?" Max knelt beside her, his voice calm and steady. "Maybe. But if anything scary happens, what do you do?" "I go to the safe room and press the red button. Uncle Dylan stays with me until you come back." "That's my brave girl." Dylan Steele arrived within minutes, dressed down but unmistakably alert. A former Marine, he'd been thoroughly briefed by Max and was prepared for anything. While Gwen eagerly showed him her drawing, Max headed to his office to prepare for what was coming. Right on schedule, Ralph's intelligence report landed. A comprehensive dossier, photos, transcripts, surveillance notes, detailing Brett's activities since his release. None of it was surprising, but all of it was deeply troubling. Brett's first stop had been Wilmington, where he'd tracked down Kara. Her life was in shambles, waiting tables at a truck stop, living in a cramped room above a bail bonds office. Her family had severed ties, her divorce had drained her finances, and her criminal record closed most doors. Still, Brett had managed to draw her back into his orbit with a twisted new plan, to take Gwen back. It was ambitious, the kind of scheme only someone like Brett could devise. Their approach was to discredit Max, presenting him as a man broken by war, unstable, paranoid, and dangerous. They forged psychiatric evaluations, fabricated records of violent outbursts, and even enlisted individuals willing to testify falsely about Max's alleged threats. The objective was straightforward: file for emergency custody on the grounds that Gwen was in imminent danger, living with a father supposedly spiraling into madness. The plan was slick, tailored to exploit common fears about veterans suffering from combat trauma. They wanted to appear like the concerned parent stepping in to protect a child from an unfit guardian. But they hadn't accounted for one thing. Jake's team had been watching the entire time. Every forged document, every conversation, every secret rendezvous had been recorded, indexed, and securely stored. Unwittingly, they had spun an intricate web of lies, deceit, and manipulation. Max's phone buzzed. Jake Krause's voice came through the receiver, composed but edged with urgency. "They're in motion, Max. Brett and Kara just left Wilmington in a rental car. They're carrying a fake custody order built on forged documentation, and they've convinced a deputy sheriff it's a legitimate emergency transfer." Max's tone was clipped. "How much time are we working with?" "An hour and a half, 2 at most," Jake replied. "The deputy's name is Hubert Nash. He's just following what he believes is a lawful order. He has no clue he's being manipulated. But be warned, Brett's got a weapon again, and Kara is carrying a taser. They're not afraid to use force to take Gwen." A familiar, calculated stillness settled over Max, the same sharpened composure that had kept him alive during countless high-risk missions. "You ready on your end?" he asked. "We're all set," Jake confirmed. "Ralph's got the legal counterstrike locked in, and Derek's already briefing Agent Sampson at the Bureau. All systems are green." "Good," Max said coolly. "Let them come." In the next 60 minutes, Max finished his preparations. He guided Gwen and Dylan into the secure chamber, activated every layer of his home's security system, and reviewed the airtight legal documents that would discredit the fraudulent custody claim. With everything in place, he settled into the living room, letting his coffee cool untouched as he waited. At 3:47 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Max answered to find a sharply dressed Deputy Nash, his expression sincere, his uniform pristine. Flanking him were Brett Mason, thinner, harder, and more alert than before, and Kara Wilder, whose face was etched with fatigue and desperation. "Sergeant Wilder?" Nash asked formally. "I've been instructed to serve an emergency custody order for Gwen Wilder. I need to see the child right away." Max took the document from Nash's hand and scanned it. It was impressively forged, credible enough to fool most eyes. "Well-crafted paperwork," he said evenly. "Mind telling me who submitted the supporting evidence?" "The child's mother and her stepfather," Nash responded. "They've submitted claims regarding your mental health and ability to parent. Medical reports, witness statements, quite a few." "Stepfather?" Max's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Brett. "That's news to me." Brett stepped forward with confidence. "Kara and I got married last week. That makes me Gwen's legal stepfather. We're seriously concerned for her safety here." Max gave a faint nod. "Congratulations. May I see a copy of the marriage certificate?" Brett handed him a document that, at a glance, looked legitimate, but Max could already tell it wouldn't hold under real scrutiny. As he appeared to read it, he quietly pressed a concealed button, sending a silent signal to Jake's team. "There's a problem with this paperwork," Max said, voice calm as ever. "What kind of problem?" Nash asked, his brow furrowing. "Well," Max began, "Kara is still legally married, to me. Our divorce was never finalized because she skipped the state before proceedings concluded, which makes this certificate invalid." He handed Nash a packet of verified documents, legal proof of the still active divorce process, his sole custody rights over Gwen, and existing restraining orders that prohibited both Brett and Kara from approaching within 500 yards of the residence. Deputy Nash sifted through the files, his frown deepening. "I'm going to have to contact the court to verify all this." "Of course," Max said smoothly. "You should also be aware that these two are currently wanted on federal charges: child endangerment, conspiracy, and now fraud and perjury." Brett's hand edged subtly toward his waistband, but Max's eyes were already locked on the movement. "Don't do it, Brett," he said, voice like cold iron. "You're in deep enough. Threatening a federal witness or a law officer will only make it worse. At that instant, Jake Krause and his tactical team emerged from concealment, swift, silent, weapons-trained, and movements efficient. From the side of the house, FBI agent Andrea Sampson appeared, badge raised. "Brett Mason, Kara Wilder, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, violating federal restraining orders, and attempted abduction," she announced firmly. Deputy Nash's training kicked in as he reached for his radio. "This is Deputy Nash, Cumberland County. I've got federal agents on site, requesting immediate supervisor dispatch to this address." The takedown was smooth and methodical. Brett tried to maintain his composure, but the mask cracked as the cuffs locked into place, his bravado draining as he sagged in resignation. Kara broke down completely, tears pouring as she sobbed that she only wanted to see her daughter. As the last pair of handcuffs clicked into place, Agent Sampson turned toward Max. "This should finally put an end to any threat they pose to your family," he said firmly. With these new federal charges added to their record, and considering their repeated violations of the original plea agreement, they're both facing serious time. Brett's looking at 8 to 12 years. Kara is likely facing 4 to 6. Max responded with a brief nod, his relief tempered by months of strain. "And the protection orders?" he asked. "Permanent," Sampson confirmed. "They're federally enforced in all states. Even after they serve their time, any attempt to reach out to you or Gwen will result in immediate arrest." As the black SUVs disappeared around the corner, Max turned and walked back inside. He made his way down to the secure room, where Gwen and Dylan waited in quiet suspense. Gwen looked up from her coloring book, uncertainty in her eyes. "Are the bad people gone now, Daddy?" she asked softly. Max knelt beside her and pulled her into a steady hug. "They're gone, honey," he whispered. "Forever?" "I promise," he said gently. "Daddy made sure they'll never come near you again." Gwen nodded, her shoulders relaxing as she returned to her drawing. Max stayed with her for a moment longer, letting the weight of the moment settle. It had taken 6 relentless months to bring them to this point. Brett and Kara had been ensnared by the consequences of their own actions, an intricate trap set by someone who had spent a lifetime mastering strategy and control in military operations. They underestimated what it meant to challenge a man like Max, a man who neither forgot nor forgave. Now the mission was complete. Max had secured a decisive victory. Gwen was safe, the threat was extinguished, justice had been served. And at last, they could look forward to something new, a future where Gwen could sleep peacefully, never needing to look over her shoulder, because her father would always be there, standing between her and anything that tried to reach her. A life untouched by fear. A year later, Max stood on the back deck of their secluded mountain home, watching Gwen toss a frisbee across the open yard. Their German shepherd, Atlas, a highly trained protection dog, leapt effortlessly into the air and snatched it mid-flight. Fierce in his loyalty and gentle in his demeanor with Gwen, Atlas was a perfect guardian and companion. They had sold the Fayetteville house. The money went toward buying this secure retreat nestled in the hills near Asheville. Here, no shadows lingered, only serenity and safety. Max had officially retired from the military. With full benefits, he'd used his pension, savings, and disability compensation to establish a secure trust fund for Gwen's future. "Daddy, look!" Gwen shouted, beaming as she held up her prosthetic hand. Her therapy had progressed beyond expectations. She could now grasp objects, write, and play with remarkable precision. The burn scars had faded, and her emotional resilience had astonished even her medical team. Max's phone vibrated, another quarterly update from Jake Krause's private monitoring firm. Brett Mason was now 3 years into his sentence at a maximum security prison in Ohio. After attempting to plan a breakout, he was reclassified as a high-risk inmate and moved to permanent solitary confinement. His earliest possible release had been pushed to 2034. Kara was confined to a federal women's prison in West Virginia. 2 attempts at parole had been denied without hesitation. Psychiatric assessments had concluded she suffered from antisocial personality disorder and pronounced narcissistic traits, making rehabilitation doubtful. With flawless behavior and completion of all court-ordered therapy, she might be eligible for release in 2031. But none of it changed anything. Both were now listed as federal child abuse offenders. The label followed them permanently, constant monitoring, barred from working near children, and living under the weight of their crimes no matter where they went. They would never shake the consequences. Max's legal battle had ended in total victory. His divorce had been finalized, and he was awarded full custody with no visitation rights. The protection orders were indefinite. Gwen's name was now legally Gwen Max Wilder, and the final steps toward her formal adoption were underway. The past had been locked away, both by law and by will. And for the first time in years, the future stretched ahead, free from fear, built on trust, and rooted in love. There were no longer any legal avenues left for Brett or Kara to re-enter Gwen's world. "Mr. Wilder?" called a woman's voice from the front porch. Max stepped out from behind the house just as Dr. Alice Stewart approached. She was the child psychologist from Asheville who had been working closely with Gwen for the past 6 months. Though she was younger than Dr. Dixon, Dr. Stewart had proven equally capable. Over time, she had developed a deep, trusting relationship with Gwen. "I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow," Max said. "I wanted a quick word before our session," she replied. "There's been a meaningful shift in Gwen's progress." Her smile was warm and measured. "Her trauma responses have improved significantly. I think we can move our appointments to once a month now." Max felt a wave of relief wash over him. "So she's really healing?" "She's doing more than healing," Dr. Stewart said. "Gwen is thriving. She's becoming confident, emotionally aware, and socially engaged. The nightmares are gone, her trust is returning, and she's starting to form stable, positive connections." She looked out toward the backyard, where Gwen was happily tossing a ball for Atlas to chase. "I want to stress how rare this kind of progress is. Children who experience prolonged trauma often carry those scars for life. What we're seeing in Gwen is a testament to the consistent love and stability she's received. That's you, Max. And it also says a lot about her own inner strength." Max's voice dropped with emotion. "She really is one of a kind." "She absolutely is," Dr. Stewart agreed. "And she has an extraordinary father." Her tone shifted slightly as she continued. "There's something else. Gwen has been asking questions about relationships and marriage." Max stiffened slightly. "She's still so young." Dr. Stewart gave a quiet laugh. "She's not talking about herself. She wants to know about you, if you'll ever get married again, if she might have a new mother someday." He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "It's actually a great sign," she explained. "It shows that she feels secure enough in your bond to start imagining a bigger future, one that might include more love, more people." Dating again hadn't been anywhere on Max's radar. His energy had been laser-focused on Gwen, her recovery, her stability. But now, the idea didn't seem quite so out of reach. Maybe there was space in their lives for something new. "What should I tell her?" he asked. "Be honest, Doctor," Stewart advised with a kind smile. "Let her know she's your top priority, but it's okay to tell her that someday you might meet someone who'd care deeply for you both." Honesty, delivered gently, that was the way forward. After Dr. Stewart left, Max walked back to the yard. Gwen was issuing playful but firm commands to Atlas. Her stance was strong, her tone confident. The frightened, withdrawn girl she'd once been had faded into memory. "Daddy!" she called, beaming. "Doctor, Alice says Atlas might be the smartest dog she's ever met." "He is pretty incredible," Max said, grinning, "but not half as amazing as his girl." Gwen beamed, then turned quiet. "Do you think Mommy and Brett feel bad about what they did to me?" she asked softly. It wasn't a new question. And over time, Max had learned how to answer, truthfully, but gently. "I think they probably do feel bad," he said carefully. "But feeling sorry doesn't undo what happened, and it doesn't mean they get to come back." Gwen nodded slowly. "I know, I was just thinking about it." She tossed the frisbee again. I'm glad they can't come back. I like our family just how it is. I do too, sweetheart, Max said, his voice thick with love. I really do. That night, after Gwen had gone to bed, Max sat at his desk, going over the final details of their long-term protection strategy. Jay Krause's team had implemented a tracking system that would alert Max immediately if either Brett or Kara came within 50 miles of him or Gwen. Ralph Best's legal team had crafted a meticulous legal framework, trusts, education funds, guardianship arrangements, and contingency plans to cover any possible scenario. If anything ever happened to Max, Gwen would be placed with carefully vetted guardians who were fully informed about her past and committed to protecting her sense of safety and stability. Meanwhile, Derek Schultz had created a rapid response system involving law enforcement, federal agents, and private security to step in if any threat emerged. Every angle, legal, technological, physical, had been covered. Max and Gwen were as secure as they could be. Just then, his phone lit up. A call from Jeanette Park, his sister-in-law. They'd reconnected after years of distance. Jeanette, a trauma nurse based in Charlotte, had offered to help monitor Gwen's health needs going forward. "Hey Max," she said, "I wanted to give you an update on that support group I mentioned. There are 3 other single dads here in Charlotte," she continued. "Most of them are veterans. Their families were targeted or harmed while they were deployed." "Targeted in what way?" Max asked. "Abuse cases, custody battles with dangerous exes, domestic violence, hard stuff. But they've come out the other side and managed to keep their kids safe and start fresh. Meeting others who've faced similar hardships could really help you and Gwen," Jeanette had suggested. Max had quietly agreed, sensing the truth in her words. Gwen needed to realize they weren't alone, that other families had endured the same darkness and come out the other side stronger. And Max knew there might be wisdom waiting for him, in the words of men who had battled their own demons. "Go ahead and arrange it," he told her. "But Jeanette, these people, you've done your due diligence?" "Extensively," she replied. "Background checks, psychological evaluations, references from multiple sources. They're trustworthy, Max. Honestly, they're remarkable people." Once he ended the call, Max slipped into his nightly ritual of securing the home. He checked every lock, reviewed each camera feed, and tested the alarms. The routine was second nature now, precise, intentional. No detail overlooked. The panic room was stocked with enough provisions to survive for days without outside help. The security system was hardwired to notify local law enforcement, the FBI, and Jake's tactical team at the first sign of trouble. He paused outside Gwen's room, listening to the soft rhythm of her sleep. No more screams in the night, no more midnight tears. Her bedroom walls were covered with artwork from therapy. Drawings of fortresses and warriors, bright butterflies and colorful skies, stick-figure families beneath grinning suns. The nightmares had receded. The threat had been faced and eliminated. Justice had been delivered, with no room for doubt. Gwen was healed, safe, loved beyond measure. She would grow up knowing her father would stop at nothing to protect her, and that some battles must be fought, no matter the toll. Max had secured a kind of victory few ever achieved. Those who harmed them were locked away. Gwen was thriving, and the life he had rebuilt stood strong, fortified by experience. But victory came with a cost, and a responsibility. Max understood he could never afford to relax. He had to stay vigilant, always ready, forever guarding what he had fought so hard to reclaim. Because if life had taught him anything, it was this. Some things are worth risking everything. And Gwen was worth more than everything. 2 years passed. Gwen was now in her second year of grade school, confident, happy, and doing exceptionally well. Then Max received a phone call that sent a chill straight through him. It was Agent Andrea Sampson. "I need to see you immediately," she said. "There's been a development in the Mason situation. This can't wait." Within half an hour, she was seated across from him in his living room. Gwen was upstairs, blissfully unaware that their carefully rebuilt world might soon be tested again. "Brett Mason is dead," Agent Sampson stated plainly. Max felt a surge of conflicting emotions, relief, a touch of grim satisfaction. and a small, bitter regret that he hadn't been the one to ensure Brett could never pose a threat again. "What happened?" he asked. "There was a fight inside the prison," she explained. "A guy named Samuel Fowler took issue with Brett's history. Apparently, he believes people like Brett deserve a different kind of justice. It was over in minutes." Max exhaled slowly. "Then why are you here?" Sampson's expression grew more serious. "Because Kara is pointing fingers. She's claiming Brett's death wasn't just some random altercation. She's saying you orchestrated it." Max gave a short, dry laugh. "That's quite the accusation. Any proof?" "Not a shred," Sampson admitted. "But she's spreading the story anyway, talking to other inmates, the guards, even her lawyer. She says if someone could reach Brett behind bars, she's next." "She wants protection?" he asked. "She's requesting a transfer to a higher security facility. And she's calling for a federal investigation, specifically into your relationships with former military contacts who might be linked to organized crime." Max crossed his arms, thinking it through. Kara was clearly grasping at anything that might buy her more time, spinning a narrative that could possibly sway someone unfamiliar with the real truth. "To someone on the outside," he said, "her story might actually sound plausible." "Which is why we have to take it seriously," Sampson replied. "Anytime there's an allegation of conspiracy or intimidation, we're required to investigate. That said, off the record, Kara doesn't exactly scream credibility. Her record speaks for itself. Child abuse, fraud. It's not a good look." "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Total transparency," she said. "I'll need access to your phone records, financial transactions, travel logs, and a full list of any contact you've had with ex-military personnel. We need to be absolutely certain that it's understood. You had nothing to do with what happened to Brett." Max gave a resolute nod. "You'll have every piece of documentation by early tomorrow," he assured her. He paused, then added, "Just so you're aware, Jake Krause's team has been tracking Brett the entire time he's been incarcerated. We've got comprehensive records proving I've had zero interaction with anyone at his facility." "That'll be critical," Sampson said, flipping the page in her notebook. "There's another issue," she continued. "Kara is now alleging that Gwen isn't safe in your care. She claims your past actions, your so-called vigilantism, make you an unsuitable guardian. She's trying to involve external agencies to initiate a custody investigation." This was more than a personal attack. It was a strategic threat. Kara might lack the standing to claim custody herself, but advocacy groups had the power to stir public outrage and trigger official inquiries. "What kind of organizations are we dealing with?" Max asked, his tone guarded. "Nonprofits that specialize in prison oversight, women's rights groups, and watchdogs who intervene when they think the justice system has failed a mother and her child." Sampson lifted her eyes to meet his. "She's saying you coerced her confession, that you tampered with key evidence, and now she's painting you as a violent, unstable veteran with PTSD, raising Gwen in a dangerous environment." Max felt his anger rise like a tide. Even locked away, Kara was trying to dismantle the fragile peace Gwen had found. It was just like her, twisting reality, deflecting guilt. The same manipulative tendencies that had enabled Brett's abuse from the beginning. "Agent Sampson," he said, voice low but deliberate. "This conversation is being recorded, right?" "It is." "Good." He leaned in slightly. "Let me say this as plainly as possible. I had zero involvement in Brett Mason's death. I didn't reach out to anyone at the prison. I never paid, threatened, or instructed anyone to harm him. Ever." He let the words settle in the air, calm and unwavering. "That said," he continued, "let me be just as clear on one more point. The world is no worse off without Brett Mason. He was a predator and a danger to children. His death doesn't grieve me." "That's a very specific line you're drawing," Sampson noted. "It's an honest one," Max replied. "I didn't end his life, but I won't pretend to feel loss. And if Kara wants to chase conspiracy theories instead of taking responsibility for her part in all this, that's her choice." Sampson shut her notebook gently. "Off the record, Max, do you think it's possible that one of your military connections acted without informing you?" Max considered the question seriously. He had deep trust in Jake, Ralph, and Derek, They were loyal, capable, and fiercely protective of Gwen. They certainly had the skills and means to do something drastic, but they also knew the boundaries and the risks. "The men I served with are men of honor," he said at last. "They've helped me safeguard Gwen, yes, but always through legal channels. Surveillance, filing paperwork, bolstering our security. I don't believe any of them would step over that line without telling me." "But you can't completely rule it out?" "I won't claim absolute certainty," he admitted. "But if anything did occur, it wasn't on my orders, and I had no knowledge of it." After Agent Sampson left, Max spent several hours making quiet phone calls. He checked in with every person he trusted. Jake, Ralph, and Derek each firmly denied any involvement, and he believed them. Their shared conclusion? Brett had likely just crossed the wrong person at the wrong moment, a common fate for someone with his crimes in a federal prison. That night, Max sat on Gwen's bed, listening as she read aloud from a story about a sharp young detective unraveling a mystery. "Daddy, Mrs. Henderson says I'm reading like a fifth grader, and I'm only in second," Gwen said proudly. "That's amazing, sweetheart," he told her with a warm smile. "You've always been quick." She closed the book and gazed up at him, her eyes deep and clear, so much like Kara's before everything had gone off course. "Daddy, is something bothering you?" Over time, Max had come to understand a simple truth. Deceiving Gwen wasn't possible. She had an uncanny instinct for sensing lies, like others might predict a change in the weather, and she'd earned the right to hear the truth, so long as it was delivered in a way she could comprehend. "There are some people asking questions about us," he said, his voice soft and careful. "They just want to make sure everything's okay for you, that you're safe and happy here." Gwen's forehead creased with concern. "What kind of questions?" "Things like, does your dad take good care of you? Are you happy living here? Do you feel safe with me?" Gwen gave a small shake of her head, confused by the idea. "That's weird. Of course I'm safe. Of course I'm happy. You're the best dad in the whole world." Max's heart swelled at her words. "I'm really glad you think so, sweetheart. But if anyone ever asks you questions like that, I want you to answer them the way you just did. Tell them exactly how you feel. Be honest, okay?" "I will, Daddy, I promise. But why would they even want to know stuff like that?" Max hesitated, carefully choosing his words. "Because your biological mother is telling people she should be allowed to see you again." Gwen's face tightened, her expression hardening, something rare for a child, but it had become familiar whenever Kara's name surfaced. "I don't want to see her," she said, her tone sharp and certain. "She didn't stop Brett when he hurt me. She told me you were dead. She's not my mom anymore." "I know, baby," Max murmured, wrapping his arms around her. "And you won't have to see her, unless that's what you decide. But there are people out there who believe kids should stay connected to their birth parents, even if those parents made terrible choices." "Well, that's dumb," Gwen said with blunt honesty only a child could deliver. "If someone's a bad parent, they shouldn't get to keep their kids. Good ones, like you, shouldn't have to give them up." Max smiled, warmed by her simple wisdom. "You're right. But sometimes, we have to prove to others what we already know in our hearts." "How do we do that?" she asked, serious now. "By living like we always have," he replied. "By being open, by being happy, and by showing how loved and safe you are here." Gwen nodded, determined. "I can do that. I'm really good at showing people that you're the best dad ever." As Max pulled the covers up around her and kissed her forehead, a quiet irony gnawed at him. Brett Mason's death had ended one threat permanently, but in doing so, it had handed Kara a fresh excuse to rewrite the past. Now, she was reshaping the story, painting Max as a dangerous man with a dark vendetta, when in truth, she should have been grateful that her old partner could never again lay a hand on a child. The next morning, Max began assembling everything Agent Sampson would need: call logs, receipts, flight itineraries, bank statements, and calendar entries, constructing an undeniable record that placed him far from the scene of Brett's demise. And yet, even as he sifted through all the details, one thought kept surfacing. What was justice, really? Whether delivered through a prison scuffle or something divine, Brett Mason had met an end he'd earned. His death was final. It was justice that no trial or sentence could offer, total and irreversible. As for Kara, she was learning her own lesson. Some decisions carry consequences that don't expire. Whatever power she once had to manipulate the system was gone. Her name meant nothing now. She would serve her entire sentence, wear the title of sex offender for life, and exist on the fringes, unseen and unwanted. In the end, Max had done what most could only dream of. He had destroyed the forces that once endangered his child. Brett was dead. Kara was locked away, her reputation in shambles. And Gwen? Gwen was safe. She was thriving. But that peace came at a price Max had willingly paid. He had long accepted that he would always need to stay alert, always be prepared to defend the life he'd built. And if protecting that life meant sacrificing anything and everything, so be it. Some things are more valuable than all else. And for Max, Gwen was beyond value. She was everything. It had been 5 years since Brett Mason died in federal custody. Gwen was now 12, a bright, driven girl with no outward scars from the pain she once knew. She played violin in the school orchestra, was a fierce competitor in academic decathlons, and had grown into a natural leader among her peers. Max stood quietly amid the sea of proud parents and teachers gathered for Gwen's middle school graduation. His gaze remained fixed on his daughter as she stepped up to receive the valedictorian honors. At just 12 years old, she spoke about high school coursework and college applications with remarkable assurance. Her prosthetic fingers, now in their third version, moved so fluidly they could easily be mistaken for real hands. "Mr. Wilder?" someone called softly behind him. He turned to find Dr. Alice Stewart, Gwen's therapist since early childhood. Over time, she had become more than just a professional contact. She was part of the family. "Dr. Stewart," he said, genuinely surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Gwen invited me," she replied with a kind smile. "She wanted me to witness this milestone." Then, with a note of admiration in her voice, she added, "Max, I've spent 15 years in child psychology, and I've never seen a recovery quite like hers. Gwen isn't merely surviving. She's flourishing. She's remarkable." "She is," Max agreed, "but she's had incredible support." Dr. Stewart's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "There's something important I need to discuss. Gwen has started asking about her birth mother again." Max's shoulders stiffened. "What kind of questions is she asking?" "Mostly about genetics, health history, developmental stuff. But she's also been wondering whether Kara has changed, whether she regrets what happened." "And what did you tell her?" Max asked, his tone cautious. "I told her that some answers only become clear with age and maturity. Still, I believe she's emotionally ready to hear more. Maybe not the full story, but a meaningful part of it." He took a moment, knowing this conversation had been inevitable. He'd feared the day Gwen would look deeper into her past. Did she say anything about wanting to see Kara? "No, not visit her. Just understand who she is. That's natural, Max. It's part of growing up, trying to piece together where you come from, even when the truth is painful." He nodded slowly. "I'll think it over." After the ceremony, Max and Gwen took the familiar drive home, weaving through the mountain roads they'd come to associate with peace. The house, once a stronghold of fear, had evolved into a place of safety. The alarm system still worked, but the fear that used to haunt every corner had faded into something more tranquil. As they rolled into the driveway, Gwen finally broke the silence. "Dad, there's something I've been meaning to say." "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" "I need to understand what happened with my birth mom. I know she's in prison. I know she did terrible things, but I want to know why." Max shut off the ignition and turned to face her. At 12, she bore an uncanny resemblance to Kara at that age. Same piercing green eyes, the strong chin, the sharp intellect. But unlike her mother, Gwen carried a quiet resilience, forged in hardship and healing. "Gwen, that's not a simple answer." "I know," she replied calmly, "but I'm not a little girl anymore. I can take it." Max took a long breath. "Your birth mother made choices. ones that hurt you deeply. She chose Brett over your safety. Instead of protecting you, she became part of the abuse, and there were consequences for that. Is she still locked up? Gwen asked. Yes, she won't be eligible for parole for another 3 years. And after that, she'll have to register as a sex offender for the rest of her life. That limits where she can live, what job she can hold, and even who she's allowed to be around. She'll always be under close watch. Gwen didn't say anything at first. She let the information sink in, the silence between them stretching. Do you think she regrets it? Max paused, choosing his words with care. I think she regrets losing everything. Whether she genuinely regrets what she did to you, I honestly don't know. And maybe that's not the most important question. Why wouldn't it be? Gwen asked. Because feeling sorry doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't rebuild trust or make someone safe again. Some things have consequences that no apology can ever erase. He looked her in the eye, making sure his words landed. There are some wrongs so severe that forgiveness isn't really possible. Not truly. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Like what Brett did. Yes, Max said, and what she allowed to happen. You need to understand something, Gwen, something vital. You don't owe either of them forgiveness, not your time, not a connection, not even your curiosity. You owe them nothing. But what if she's changed? Gwen asked gently. What if she's really sorry and wants to make amends? That old protective instinct surged within Max, but he kept his tone steady and firm. If she has changed, then that's for her to live with. Her remorse doesn't come before your safety, your healing, or your future. Those things come first, always. They sat quietly, the weight of the conversation pressing gently around them like a fog. Then Gwen broke the silence. Dad, I've decided something. What's that? I never want to lay eyes on her again. I don't even want the sound of her voice anywhere near my memories. Still, maybe someday, when time has dulled the edges and I've built a life far from this, I might write to her. Not to grant her absolution, she hasn't earned that, but to tell her, word for word, how her choices scarred me, and how I rose despite them. Max offered a small, wounded smile. That might be something worth discussing with Dr. Stewart when you're ready. I will, Gwen said in a hushed tone. But Dad, there's one more thing I need you to really hear. What is it, honey? You're the one who truly raised me. You kept me protected. You helped me heal. You showed me what it actually means to be loved. Being tied by blood doesn't make someone a parent. What matters is who's there, who stays, who loves you through the worst. A wave of emotion surged in Max's chest, tight and unrelenting. You mean everything to me, Gwen. Every decision I've made, every sacrifice, I did it all for you. To give you a life you could feel safe in, one that matters. I know you did, Dad. And I'm grateful. Even for the painful parts. Because they showed me how strong I really am. And they proved that people who love you, they fight for you. That night, Max placed his usual call to Jake Kraus, just another routine check-in for security. Over time, their surveillance setup had evolved, from constant live feeds to smart triggered alerts, but it still worked as a quiet, invisible shield. Any word on Kara? Max asked. Nothing out of line, Jake replied. She's playing by the book, showing up to every session, saying all the right things during evaluations. Her remorse looks good on paper, and her parole request is starting to gain some traction. When could she be out? Could be as soon as 1.5 years, 2 years at most. But even if they approve it, she won't be free in any real sense. She'll be tagged, monitored, restricted in where she can live or work. It's more like life on a very long leash. And if she breaks those conditions? She's back inside. No warnings, no hearings, even a hint of contact with Gwen, and it's over. No second chances. That brought Max some relief. The system had done its part. Kara might eventually walk out of prison, but she'd never outrun the weight of what she'd done. Her freedom would come shackled with conditions, forever. There's another thing, Max added. Gwen is getting older now. She's asking more questions about her mom. I need to know, If Kara ever tries to make contact through any channel, we'll know before it happens. We're already on it. Calls, mail, visitation lists. We're monitoring every point of contact. If she even thinks about reaching out to Gwen, we'll catch wind of it fast. After ending the call, Max moved through his nightly routine, checking locks, scanning alarm panels. But tonight it wasn't about immediate threats. It was about guarding the peace Gwen had earned, the quiet she needed to keep growing. He paused at her doorway. She was lying on her bed, lost in a book on forensic science, a new passion sparked by everything she'd endured early on. She'd been talking about a future in law, maybe prosecution, maybe advocacy, something where she could speak for those who couldn't. "Dad?" she said suddenly, not looking up. "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up, for protecting me, for making sure the people who hurt me couldn't get near me again, for being the kind of dad who doesn't back down." He smiled softly and leaned down to kiss her hair. "You never have to thank me, Gwen. That's just what a dad does. A real one." She nodded slightly. "Yeah, the bad ones, they either do the harm or let it happen." "You're right, but you're safe now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." She looked up with a playful smirk. "Good. I kinda like having you around forever." Later that evening, as Max settled under the covers, old memories stirred. He was pulled back to that day when he found her in that dark room, barely conscious, body shattered, fingers gone, skin blistered. And then he thought of now, of the strong, radiant young woman reading quietly in the next room. The path between those two moments had been relentless. He'd sacrificed his military career, drained every account, given up normalcy. He'd learned how to shut down emotions when needed, to act without hesitation if it meant keeping her safe. He'd made enemies, broken people, and not once, not for a second, did he regret it. As Max watched Gwen now, seeing the woman she was becoming, a profound certainty settled in him. Every struggle had been worth it. Every compromise he'd made, each punishing legal battle he'd endured, and all the restless nights spent in silent vigilance had been in service of a single, unwavering goal: to protect the one person who meant more to him than anything else in the world. Brett Mason was no longer a danger. Kara, stripped of her influence, was imprisoned. Gwen was thriving, safe, loved, and without fear. The ghosts of yesterday had finally been laid to rest. The princess now resided in her haven, guarded by a knight who would never abandon his post. Max Wilder had achieved what so few ever manage. He had entirely overcome the forces that had threatened to destroy his family. He had paid the price, endured the fallout, and delivered a justice that was absolute and unshakable. The war was over. Good had triumphed, and Gwen would never again have reason to fear the shadows. Still, Max would never grow complacent. He would always be watching, always be strengthening their defenses, always prepared to safeguard what he had fought so fiercely to protect. Because some things in life require eternal watchfulness, and to him, Gwen was worth everything. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the Force be with you. See you soon, my friend.